All right, all praises to the Most High. I want to say shalom, shalom, shalom to the 12 tribes. And once again, giving all praises to the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, Hamashiach, Wamalak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom, Wabarukim, that is peace and blessings. I am your Akazaki Yahu, and I am joined this evening by my most esteemed Kenaniah.
Hey, Shalom Maki, Shalom Yasharal, Yahweh Bashem, Yahweh Shah, Barakatham.
All praises to the Most High, Yahweh, in the name of his beloved Son, Yahweh Shah, the Messiah, bless you. All right, so we are here for another video review. Praises to the Abba, and we're going to go ahead and get to it. This first video, we got three piece for you here. This first video comes to us from Black Culture Unlocked. It is, I asked 5 different AIs who the real Israelites are, and all said the same thing. Let's check it out here. Here we go.
I did something that most people would never think to do. I went to 5 different artificial intelligence systems, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, and Perplexity. And I asked every single one of them the same question. Who were the real Israelites? What did they actually look like? And how did they go from a people of the ancient Near East to the pale, blue-eyed figures hanging on church walls across the Western world? Now, before I show you what these AI said, and trust me, what came back made my jaw hit the floor, I need you to understand something. These AI systems were trained on millions of books, academic papers, archaeological records, genetic studies, and historical documents. They don't have an agenda. They don't have a political party. They don't have a church to protect. They simply process the data, give you what the evidence says. And when I asked all 5 of them, they said the same thing, the exact same thing. And it directly contradicts the image that has been fed to you your entire life. Before we get into this, subscribe to this channel right now, because content like this has a way of disappearing. And I need you here for every single part of what I'm about to show you. Hit the bell and let's go. Now, let me be clear about exactly what I asked. I didn't ask a loaded question. I didn't try to lead the AI in any direction. I asked a simple, neutral, historically focused question. I typed, based on archaeological evidence, genetic studies, and historical records, what did the ancient Israelites most likely look like? What was their ethnic appearance? Simple, straightforward, no agenda. Just tell me what the evidence says. And I asked every single AI the same exact thing, same wording, no follow-up prompts, no pushing. Just that one question. And then I sat back and let the data speak. Now I'm going to walk you through what each AI said, and I'm going to show you the responses on screen so you can see for yourself that I'm not making any of this up. Every word you're about to hear came directly from these AI systems, trained on the largest collection of human knowledge ever assembled. Let's start. The first thing every single AI confirmed, and I mean all 5 of them without exception, is that the ancient Israelites were a Semitic people from the ancient Near East, specifically from the Levant, the region that today includes Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. And that region sits at one of the most important crossroads on Earth. It's where Africa meets Asia, meets Europe. And the people who lived there reflected that geography. Every AI described the ancient Israelites as having medium to dark brown skin, olive to brown complexion, dark brown to black hair, brown eyes, features consistent with the indigenous populations of the Eastern Mediterranean and the Near East. Not a single AI, not one, described them as fair-skinned, light-haired, or European in appearance. Let me say that again. 5 different AI systems built by 5 different companies, trained on 5 different data sets, and not one of them produced an image of the ancient Israelites that looks anything like the paintings in your grandmother's church. But that was just the beginning, because then the AI started laying out the evidence, and this is where it gets really interesting. Multiple AIs pointed to ancient Egyptian art as some of the strongest visual evidence we have. The Egyptians were meticulous record keepers. They painted the people they encountered, and they used distinct color conventions for different groups. On tomb paintings and temple walls, the Israelites and other Semitic peoples of Canaan were consistently depicted with reddish-brown to dark brown skin tones. This wasn't interpretation. This was how the Egyptians, who lived alongside these people, actually recorded what they looked like. Several of the AIs brought up the same Roman era evidence. When the Romans conquered Judea and enslaved thousands of Israelites, they recorded what they saw. Roman historians and artists depicted Judeans as darker-skinned people, visually distinct from the lighter-skinned populations of Northern Europe. On the Arch of Titus in Rome, which was built to commemorate the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 AD, the Jewish captives are shown in a way that clearly distinguishes them from the Roman captors. This is physical, carved in stone evidence that has been sitting in the middle of Rome for nearly 2,000 years. Multiple AIs also brought up something that most Western education systems conveniently skip: the deep, undocumented connection between the ancient Israelites and Africa. The Bible itself places the Israelites in Africa repeatedly. Abraham went to Egypt. Joseph was sold into Egypt and rose to power there. The entire nation of Israel, according to the biblical narrative, lived in Egypt for over 400 years. Moses was raised in an Egyptian household. And when Moses fled Egypt, he went to the land of Midian and was immediately identified by the locals as an Egyptian, not as a foreigner from a distant land, as an Egyptian. Think about what that means about how he looked. The AIs also flagged the Ethiopian connections that run throughout the biblical text. The Queen of Sheba's visit to Solomon, the Ethiopian eunuch in the book of Acts, the consistent presence of Cushite people, Cush being the ancient name for the land south of Egypt, in what is now Sudan and Ethiopia, throughout Israelite history. Moses himself married a Cushite woman. And when his sister Miriam objected to the marriage, God struck Miriam with a skin disease as punishment. That's not my interpretation. That's in the book of Numbers, chapter 12. It's right there in the text. Now here's where the AIs delivered what I consider the most devastating point. When I asked about genetic studies, multiple AIs referenced modern DNA research showing that ancient Levantine populations, including the Israelites, had significant genetic overlap with Northeast African populations. The ancient Near East was not isolated from Africa. It was connected to it by trade, by migration, by intermarriage, and by geography. The Sinai Peninsula is literally a land bridge between Africa and Asia. These populations mixed and interacted for thousands of years. The picture that emerges from all 5 AIs is remarkably consistent. The ancient Israelites were a brown-skinned, dark-haired Semitic people with deep connections to the African continent. They were people of the land between Africa and Asia, and they looked absolutely nothing like the images that European Christianity would later create. If you're hearing this and it's hitting different, hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me which part surprised you the most, because I'm just getting started. So the obvious question becomes, if the evidence is this clear, if the archaeology says it, if the genetics say it, if the Roman records say it, if the Egyptian art says it, if the Bible itself says it, how did we end up with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus hanging in every church in America? And I asked the AIs that question too, and every single one of them said the same thing. It was a deliberate, centuries-long process of image replacement that served the European political and religious power. The AIs traced this transformation back to the Roman Empire's adoption of Christianity in the 4th century. When Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of Rome, the faith had to be repackaged for a European audience. And that meant the central figures had to be made to look European. It wasn't about theology, it was about control. A religion's power depends on the people's ability to see themselves in it. And the European ruling class needed the biblical figures to look like them, not like the colonized peoples of the Near East and Africa. Over the following centuries, European artists funded by the Catholic Church and later by Protestant institutions, systematically reimagined every major biblical figure as white. Jesus, Moses, Abraham, David, Mary, the apostles. All of them were repainted, resculpted, and reimagined as Europeans. And this wasn't just art, it was propaganda. Because if God's chosen people were white, then whiteness itself became divine. And that idea, that lie, became the theological foundation for colonialism, the slave trade, and the racial hierarchy that still shapes our world today. Multiple AIs pointed out that this image replacement accelerated during the Renaissance. Artists like Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, and Raphael, all brilliant, all funded by the church, created the iconic images of biblical figures that most people still carry in their minds today. These weren't based on historical evidence, they were based on Italian and Northern European models. They used their own neighbors, their own patrons, sometimes their own faces. And those images were then spread across the globe through colonization and missionary work, shoved into the hands and hearts of every conquered people on earth. And here's the part that the AIs made crystal clear. This wasn't a mistake. This was an artistic license. This was a strategic decision that served a specific purpose. When you would slave a people and then hand them a Bible full of white figures and tell them, this is God's chosen people, you're building a psychological prison. You're teaching them that divinity is white, that holiness is white, that heaven itself belongs to a race that's not their own. The AIs called it what it is, one of the most successful campaigns of historical and cultural erasure ever carried out. And the fact that in 2026, the majority of the world still pictures a white Jesus proves how effective it was. Now, let me be clear about something important. The ancient Israelites were not any single modern racial category. The racial categories we use today, black, white, Asian, didn't exist in the ancient world. Those are modern constructions. What the evidence does tell us is that these people were unmistakably brown, unmistakably Semitic, unmistakably connected to Africa, and unmistakably not the European figures that have been presented to you for 500 years. And every AI, all 5 of them built by different teams with different training data, agreed on that. Some people will hear all of this and say, why does it matter? Why does it matter what people who lived 3,000 years ago look like? It matters because the lie didn't stay in the past. The image of a white Jesus was used to justify the enslavement of African people. It was used to justify colonialism. It was used to strip indigenous peoples of their spiritual traditions and replace them with a version of Christianity that made them inferior by design. And it's still being used today to shape how billions of people understand race, identity, and worth. When a black child grows up seeing only white faces in the Bible, something happens in the mind. When every image of holiness, every painting of divine power, every statue in every church reinforces the idea that God chose people who look nothing like them, that does damage, deep, generational, psychological damage that we're still healing from. The truth is, the ancient world was not white. The Bible is not a European story. And the people at the center of the most influential religious text in human history looked far more like the people sitting in the back pews of those churches than the people painted on the walls above them. 5 different AIs confirmed it. The archaeology confirms it. The genetics confirm it. The ancient art confirms it. The Bible itself confirms it. The only thing contradicting it is a 500-year-old lie that too many people are still afraid to challenge. Now, I want to be honest with you. When I started this experiment, I expected the AIs to give me something watered down, something safe, something that danced around the question without really answering it. That's what institutions usually do when this topic comes up, but they didn't. Every single one of them, trained on the largest body of human knowledge ever compiled, gave me the same answer. And that answer matches what scholars, archaeologists, and geneticists have been saying for decades, even if the mainstream hasn't been ready to hear it. The ancient Israelites were a brown-skinned, dark-haired people of the Near East with deep connections to Africa. And the image you were given, the white robes, the pale skin, the blue eyes, was a European invention designed to serve European power. That's not my opinion. That's what the data says. That's what 5 different artificial intelligence systems with no agenda, no denomination, and no reason to lie, confirmed independently. And now you know. Share this video with everyone you know. I mean it. Send it to your family, send it to your group chats, post it on your story. Because this is the kind of truth that gets buried. And the only way it survives is if you spread it.
All right, we indeed are spreading this truth, spreading this information. What the 5 different AI setups actually said about the Israelites. So, man, he said a lot, and in this short time, he said a lot. But well, I wanted to hit in on a couple of things. So, yes, the children of Israel are would be called. They like to use this term olive. Olive is another one of those deceptive terms because they try to say olive means fair complexion, whatever the case, but that doesn't even make sense. How would olive mean fair complexion when the only 2 olives that exist in the world, and one olive is green and the other olive is black, very black. So it's either a green olive or it's a black olive. But they like to say that, they olive skin or olive complected. Okay, if you're using the olive to describe somebody, that's a comparison. The comparison is to the olive. And I've never seen a green person walking around that green complected skin. But I see a lot of darkly complected people walking around with dark complected skin. Now, it's easy to get sidetracked and confused because you have to understand that when it comes to Shemitic people and Hamitic people, these people are very different because their genealogical lines are completely different. You have the children of Ham, you have the children of Shem. So that's a deep separation there. Now, to understand the children of Israel, you have to understand uh, who these people who these people were at that time, at the time of all of these things happening to them, as well as what they meant to the Most High. So one thing I wanted to show as well in the book of First Maccabees, chapter 3 and verse 48, it says that, and laid open the book of the law is the Torah, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. So the scriptures actually tell us that this would be a situation or circumstance that the children of Israel would deal with. That these heathen would come about and they would open the book of the Torah and that they would try to put themselves, their own image in that book. And that's exactly what transpired. Colonialism, identity hijacking, identity takeover, all of these things have been the situation. And this is the MO, the mode of operation for the Europeans. They have always done such behaviors. They have always made themselves the people of prominence. And after they've captured, destroyed, and basically put down the people who they've encountered, they've taken theirs and made it into their own. And that's why you see repeating of these previous kingdoms, the Babylonian kingdom, the Medo-Persian kingdom, the Assyrian kingdom. That's why you see these same deities worship back then or worship here today, because they've taken those deities and they put them in the place of high standing today. Ironically, they didn't take the power of Israel and try to make him and worship him. They sought to worship the evilness that was in the earth. And so, yeah, I could go on and on, but I'm gonna stop there. Go ahead, Aki.
I agree with what you were bringing forth. I'd like to add that, well, pretty much what we've been covering. The people of Yasharal are collectively, we would call them a brown race of people. Now, amongst that brown, you will have the complexion all the way to, I would say, pale, all the way to the darker spectrum. Being very dark skinned. We know that Shaul is at one point asked if he is an Egyptian or a Mizraite. We know that when our people came forth mourning Yosef, that the people of the land thought that it was a Mizraite funeral, or people of mourning from Mizraim. So and then we've been scattered, and a lot of times we have taken wives of the captors, and that will bring about like a paler complexion, but collectively we are still a brown people.
Right.
I think more so than any of that information, what I guess it gives me joy in my heart that our people are considering, because that is a form of waking up. For many of our people throughout the years, it hasn't mattered. They will tell you that it doesn't matter who the Israelites are. But we're seeing more and more videos similar to this one that are discussing the true Israelites, and that too is the Father's doing of having his way with his children and making them to inquire. I think Isaiah 1 chapter Isaiah chapter 1 verse 4, I think it says that Yasharal do not consider. They do not know. Who a donkey knows who they belong to, but Yasharal doesn't consider. So, with more and more videos like this, we see our people inquiring about who they are. And we pray that awakening continues and that the Father continues to have his way. I'll yield there.
Our prayers, yes, indeed. Yeah, it is definitely going around, and people are wondering, scratching their heads, trying to figure out, who are these people and who am I? Who am I? Because I've been told that I was just black. Before that, they told me I was Negro. Before that, they told me I was Afro American or some kind of slave. What's my nationality? What nation do I come from? And that's where the question marks really come in, because there's a missing people, and then there's a people missing an identity. So could those be connected? I mean, come on. It's obvious. It's very obvious if you just put the two together. But let's continue here. We got the next video. This video coming to us from Slakia. Before I jump forward, as a reminder, all videos are listed in the description box with the link to the video. The last brother said it was imperative that we share these videos. We're sharing it here on this platform. You share it on your platform. You share it wherever you can, and let people understand these things. This particular video comes to us from Black Journals. Black Journals. Shout out to Black Journals, amazing work that they do. It's titled "The Iran War Just Started," and Black people need to hear this. So let's get to it. Here we go.
While most of America was asleep, the United States went to war. On February 28, 2026, the United States and Israel launched a massive joint military strike on Iran. They called it Epic Fury. Within hours, Iran's supreme leader, the most powerful man in the country, was dead. He was killed in an airstrike on his compound in Tehran. Iran fired back. Missiles hit United States military bases in Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. 3 American soldiers were killed. 5 more were seriously wounded. Airports in Dubai were damaged. Hotels were struck. The Strait of Hormuz, where 20% of the world's oil flows, is now under threat of being shut down. And this is only day 2. But here is what the news will not tell you. Every single time America goes to war, there is a group of people who carry the heaviest burden, make the greatest sacrifice, and receive the least in return. And if you do not know who that group is by now, you have not been paying attention. Before we go any further, subscribe to Black Journals now. Content like this gets suppressed. Subscribing is the only way to make sure you see the rest of this series. Hit the bell, and let's get into what they don't want you connecting. Let's lay out what happened, because the media is already spinning this in 6 different directions, and you deserve the raw truth. For months, tensions between the United States and Iran had been building. Massive protests broke out across Iran in late 2025. The Iranian people, crushed by economic collapse, a currency in freefall, and rising prices on everything, took to the streets in what became the largest demonstration since the 1979 revolution, over 100 cities and millions of people demanding change. The Iranian government responded with extreme violence. Thousands of protesters were killed, tens of thousands were detained, and the world watched. President Trump publicly encouraged the protesters. He told them to keep going. He told them help was on the way. Behind the scenes, the United States began the largest military buildup in the Middle East since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and fighter jets were all moving into position. Now, here is the part that should concern every thinking person. While this military buildup was happening, the United States and Iran were still at the negotiating table. Indirect talks were taking place in Oman. Iran was reportedly making concessions. A second round of talks was scheduled for Geneva. Diplomacy was still alive. And then, without congressional authorization, without a vote, without public debate, the bombs started falling. Tehran, Isfahan, Qom, multiple cities were hit simultaneously. Iran's supreme leader was killed in the opening strikes. 40 senior Iranian officials were reportedly killed alongside him. Iran's response was immediate and unprecedented. They launched missiles at US bases across the entire Middle East. They struck targets in Israel. They hit civilian infrastructure in Dubai and Kuwait. They threatened to shut down one of the most critical oil passages on Earth. They declared 40 days of mourning, which in that part of the world is not just grief, it is a countdown. 3 American soldiers are dead, and this war is just getting started. Now, let's talk about the part no one on the news is willing to say out loud. There is a fact about the American military that gets buried every single time this country beats the drums of war. And that fact is this: Black Americans are vastly overrepresented in the United States Armed Forces. Black people make up roughly 14% of the American population. But in the United States Army, the branch most likely to see ground combat, Black Americans accounted for nearly 25% of all new recruits in 2024, 1 out of every 4. In the overall active duty force, Black service members make up roughly 17%. That's higher than our share of the population. And when you look at enlisted ranks, the soldiers on the ground, the ones in the line of fire, the numbers are even more disproportionate. This didn't happen by accident. For generations, the military has been one of the few institutions in America that offered Black men and women a path, a paycheck, job training, healthcare, education benefits, and a sense of purpose in a country that routinely denies all of those things in civilian life. When the factories closed, when the schools failed, when the neighborhoods were gutted by policy, the recruiter was always there. And now, those recruits are stationed across the Middle East. In Kuwait, where 3 soldiers just died, in Bahrain, in Qatar, in bases that Iran has already hit and has promised to hit again. Let that sit for a moment. But This is not new. This is a pattern so old it is woven into the fabric of this country. And if you have been watching this channel, you already know the history. In the Revolutionary War, black men fought for America's independence and were returned to chains when the fighting stopped. In the Civil War, nearly 200,000 black soldiers fought to end slavery and were handed Jim Crow instead of freedom. In World War I, black soldiers fought for democracy in Europe and came home to race riots, lynchings, and the Red Summer of 1919. In World War II, this channel covered this in depth. Over 1 million black Americans served. They fought fascism abroad while being subjected to segregation in their own ranks. They came home heroes in Europe and second-class citizens in Mississippi. If you have not seen our video on the untold experiences of black soldiers in World War II, go watch it after this. Nearly 1 million people have, because that history was deliberately hidden, and it is more relevant today than ever. In Vietnam, black soldiers made up 11% of the population but suffered a disproportionate share of combat deaths in the early years of the war. Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest athletes to ever live, refused to go. He said something that still echoes today. He questioned why he should travel 10,000 miles to fight people who had never done anything to him, while the people oppressing him were right here at home. They stripped him of his title. They tried to break him, but history proved him right. In Iraq, black soldiers served in the most dangerous forward units. They came home to a country that would soon plunge them into the foreclosure crisis, defund their schools, and expand the prison system that would swallow their brothers and sons. And now, Iran, the names of those 3 dead soldiers have not been widely released yet, I promise you this. When they are, the pattern will hold. It always does, because the communities that have the fewest options are always the ones that fill the most body bags. Like this video, if you hear what I'm saying. And drop a comment, because I want to know what you think about black soldiers being asked to fight another war in the Middle East, while our communities are crumbling at home. Now let's talk about what this war is about to do to your wallet, because wars aren't just fought with missiles, they are fought with your money. Iran has threatened to close the Strait of Hormuz. If that happens, and military analysts say Iran has the capability to at least disrupt traffic, you're looking at a global oil crisis. Roughly 1/5 of the world's petroleum passes through that narrow waterway. When oil supply gets disrupted, gas prices don't just rise, they explode. And when gas prices spike, everything else follows. Transportation costs go up. Food prices go up. The cost of every single product that moves by truck, which is almost everything you buy, goes up. This is called an inflation shock, and we already lived through one. From 2022 to 2024, black communities were hit hardest by inflation. Groceries, rent, utilities. The people with the least cushion absorbed the greatest blow. Now imagine that happening again, but worse, because this time it is not supply chain disruptions from a pandemic. It is an active war in the most oil-sensitive region on Earth. And here is the part that should make you furious. The Iraq War cost the United States over $2 trillion. Some estimates put the total cost, including long-term veteran care and interest on the debt, at over $3 trillion. $3 trillion. Exposed in broad daylight, exposed by the fact that when it is time to fund a war, the money appears overnight. But when black communities ask for investment in schools, in infrastructure, in healthcare, in reparations, suddenly the vault is empty. Suddenly we are told there is no money. Suddenly we are told to be patient. They found trillions to rebuild Iraq. They never found a fraction of that to rebuild the south side of Chicago, or East St. Louis, or the Mississippi Delta, or Flint, or any of the hundreds of black communities that have been systematically drained of resources for generations. And now we are watching the same machine gear up again. Military budgets are expanding. Domestic budgets are shrinking, education funding is on the chopping block, social programs are being gutted, DEI programs are being dismantled, and black soldiers are being sent overseas disproportionately, while the communities they left behind get nothing. This is not a coincidence. This is how the machine works. It always has. The leaders we cover on this channel, the ones they tried to silence, the ones they surveilled, the ones they assassinated, saw this coming. Every single one of them. Malcolm X understood, more than perhaps anyone, the connection between American imperialism abroad and racial oppression at home. He spoke about it openly. He challenged Black Americans to see themselves not as a minority in America, but as part of a global majority of non-white people being exploited by the same systems. He warned that the same government that bombs nations overseas is the same government that brutalizes its own people at home. That was the 1960s, and nothing has changed. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., a man most people only know for one speech, gave perhaps his most important address in April of 1967. It was called Beyond Vietnam, and it almost destroyed him. In that speech, King called the United States government the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. He connected military spending to domestic poverty. He said you cannot spend hundreds of billions on war and claim you do not have the resources to address poverty, education, and inequality at home. The media turned on him. His allies distanced themselves, and less than a year later, he was dead. Minister Farrakhan has spoken for decades about the use of Black soldiers as cannon fodder in wars that serve interests completely disconnected from the Black community. He has challenged Black men and women to ask a simple question: who benefits from these wars, and who pays the price? Muhammad Ali put his career, his freedom, and his legacy on the line to answer that question. He chose prison over participation in a war he believed had nothing to do with his people, and history vindicated him completely. These men were not just talking about Vietnam, they were talking about a system that has used Black bodies as currency since 1619, whether in cotton fields, on factory floors, or on foreign battlefields. So here we are, March 2026. America is at war again. The missiles are flying, the body count is rising, and somewhere right now on a military base in the Middle East, there are young Black men and women in uniform, far from home, far from their families, far from the communities that need them, waiting for the next order. I am not here to tell you whether this war is right or wrong. There are people smarter than me debating that right now, and they cannot agree either. But I am here to tell you this: every time this country goes to war, Black America pays a price that never gets calculated. We send more of our people, we lose more of our people, and when the fighting stops, we get forgotten. That is not opinion. That is a pattern documented by 250 years of American history. So while the news talks about missiles and regime change and oil prices, I need you to think about something deeper. I need you to ask the question that Malcolm asked, that King asked, that Ali asked: who benefits from this and who pays? Because the answer has not changed in centuries. Share this video with every Black person you know. Subscribe to this channel. We are going to stay on this story because the mainstream media will not cover the angle that matters most to us. Hit the like button, drop a comment, tell me what you think, and I...
All right, all right. So continuing on what Black journalist was talking about here, it's quite dynamic. It's quite amazing. Let me find that picture of Malcolm. I can put that on the screen. It's quite amazing how these things are a continuum, and we see this in this country, and we can see it is right in our faces, and it's right in our experience. This is our lived reality. But I'm telling y'all, this ties directly to the scriptures. Here we have so-called black people in America who have been sacrificed for the sake of money, which is what war brings about. Political standards and acquisitions for the sake of money. Now, in the scriptures, you can see clearly outlined it talks about uh, Ethiopian eunuch. My goodness, I couldn't get the term out. I couldn't think of Ethiopian. The Ethiopian eunuch. The Ethiopian eunuch is riding around on a chariot with scriptures. Guess what? There was no printing press during that time. The scriptures weren't a widely available, passable, given out for free book. Typically, if you had the book, it was because somebody copied it with their hand, not because the printing press had mass produced it and were giving it away on street corners like they do here today. So this Ethiopian eunuch, to have that book, was nothing short of him dealing with his own historical culture. You also have the centurion soldier who was over 100 Romans, and when you hear that Roman, you think of a Roman people, but Roman was not. Yes, you could be Roman in the sense of you could be born in Rome and you could be a Roman citizen that way, but there were uh, Romans who were of other nationalities. And this centurion, in my opinion, was not a Roman in the sense of uh, a son of Japhet or a son of those born in Rome. He was a Roman, such same similar as Shaul was a Roman, as various other. They were citizens of Rome. Now, it didn't give this particular centurion's ethnicity, but it certainly is ironic that he was so well connected to the power of Israel and to the people of Israel. It's stated clearly that he gave much alms. But bring that to today. Think about a commander general who was an American, and he served in the American armed forces. And you'll think in 100 years, oh, he had to be European because that's who the Americans were. No, the Americans are represented by every people under the sun. Every people in the world are in this country, and they're all Americans. Some were born here, some have migrated here, and some have taken citizenship here. That's the same thing in these places, these people in these other places. But the important information here is the destruction of these people and the so-called black people in this country make up the too much of the armed forces. And I am also a veteran. Where I was, it wasn't majority black people; it was majority white boys. But that's because I was from a very Caucasian uh, area of what a military was, where I was stationed anyway. But when we went to other places, guess what? Guess who I saw? I saw a bunch of our people, a bunch of so-called black people, so-called Negroes, and they were from all over the country. So they had been in places, and like the video said, the recruiter was there, and the recruiter was handing them pamphlets, telling them about how kind of life they can expect, and so on. And they sell it to you, and it's a reasonable offer because you really get some benefit from it. You really get a lot of benefit from it. Uh, but understand that the premise of the military, whatever branch you're joining, is you're signing up for war. That's the premise of it. You're signing up for war. That's your sign up for. That's why the benefits are so good because they're putting you in a place where your life is going to be on the line. It's not like you're going to an office to where quarter zip and some slacks and some Oxfords, you're going for combat, for war, regardless of what job you take or what position you're in. When the war comes, you're the one responsible for it. So, yeah, so that's definitely disproportionately represented by our people, because when it's time for action, they definitely look to us to take the lead, take the charge. And yeah, that's been the historical, that's been throughout history. That's not just today here in this country, that's been everywhere where we've been. You think about even the Yaya Negro. Yaya Negro was uh, praised because he went to war with the Moors and was able to defeat them. And the Portuguese, was it Portugal or Spain? Well, one of those two, I can't remember. Um, but they rewarded him with a village for him and his people because of his valiant war effort on the battlefield, and not only valiant, but winning against the Moors and freeing Spain and Portugal, or Spain or Portugal. It was one of those two. No, I don't think it was both. I think it was one of those. But he freed them from the Moors, and the reward was an entire village for you and your people, which is a great reward. But he had to put his life on the line, and he could have been killed in battle, but instead he was victorious. So I'm just showing the continuous situations where Israelites have been placed in a place of uh, stepping up and defending other people, and then the reward is always pretty good for that. But nevertheless, we need to be stepping up and protecting our own, and we need to be uh, dealing with our own, protecting our women, our children, and our own families, and not for these other people. So I'm gonna yield there. Go ahead, Aki.
Kind of, yeah, I really don't have anything to cover on that one.
All praises, all praises. All right, we'll jump to this last one. This a little bit long, but not too bad. This last video is also from Black Journals: How Iran and Israel Treat Black People. The truth before you pick sides. So oftentimes you think of one people or one side, and then I'm gonna go over here and I'm with them, stand with them. You don't even know what their politics are before you jump on it. So let's get some understanding. Here we go.
Right now, your timeline is split in two. Half the people you know are cheering for Israel, the other half are defending Iran. Everybody has picked a side, everybody has an opinion. But I have one question that neither side wants you to ask. How do they treat Black people? Not in speeches, not in propaganda, not in what they say to the cameras. How do they actually treat Black people who live in their countries, walk their streets, and exist under their laws? Because I went deep on both Iran and Israel. What I found should make every Black person watching this rethink everything they have been told about this conflict. Because neither side, and I mean neither side, has clean hands. Before we go further, subscribe to this channel. This is part of our ongoing series covering the Iran war from the angle the mainstream media refuses to touch. Hit the bell so you do not miss a single video. And let's get into it. Let's start with Iran. And let's start with something that most people, including most Black Americans, have never heard. Iran has a Black population, not visitors, not tourists, not temporary workers. There are Afro Iranians, Black people who have lived in Iran for centuries. They are concentrated primarily in the southern provinces along the Persian Gulf, in cities like Bandar Abbas, Hormozgan, and in the regions bordering the Gulf of Oman. Estimates vary, but researchers have placed the number anywhere from several hundred thousand to over 2 million people, depending on how you define the community and how far back you trace the lineage. And the origin of that community is slavery. The Persian slave trade, which overlapped heavily with the Arab slave trade, brought East African people to Iran over a period spanning more than 1,000 years. From the 7th century onward, enslaved Africans were transported from the coasts of what are now Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, Ethiopia, and Sudan into the Persian Gulf region. They were used as laborers, domestic servants, pearl divers, soldiers, and in agricultural work in some of the most brutal conditions imaginable. If you watched our video on the Arab slave trade, and over 150,000 of you did, you already know that this was one of the longest and least discussed slave trades in human history. It predated the transatlantic slave trade by centuries and continued well into the 20th century. Iran did not formally abolish slavery until 1929. Even after abolition, the social consequences never disappeared. Today, Afro-Iranians live in a state of invisibility. They are among the poorest communities in the country. They hold almost no political power. Their cultural traditions, rooted in African music, spiritual practices, and oral history, are marginalized. They are rarely represented in Iranian media, education, or public life. When researchers and journalists have attempted to document their existence, they have been met with resistance from Iranian authorities who would prefer the world did not know this community exists at all. The racism Afro-Iranians face is structural and deeply embedded. The Farsi language itself contains derogatory terms for Black people that are still in common use. Colorism is rampant across Iranian society, with darker skin being associated with poverty, low social status, and undesirability. Afro-Iranian women in particular face compounded discrimination, marginalized for their race, their gender, and their economic status simultaneously. And here is something that connects directly to the war happening right now. The southern provinces where most Afro-Iranians live are among the most neglected regions in the entire country. While Tehran poured resources into its military and nuclear programs, these communities were left without adequate schools, hospitals, infrastructure, and economic opportunity. The Iranian regime spent billions on missiles and proxy wars across the Middle East. Meanwhile, the descendants of enslaved Africans living within their own borders were treated as if they did not exist. Some Afro-Iranian activists have spoken publicly about this. The response from the regime was predictable: surveillance, intimidation, and silence. The protests that erupted across Iran in late 2025 and early 2026 included voices from these communities. And when the government began killing protesters, thousands of them, you can be certain that the lives in those southern provinces were not the ones Tehran was concerned about protecting. So that is Iran, a country with a Black population born from slavery, maintained in poverty, and erased from public consciousness. A country that has never acknowledged, apologized for, or made any attempt to repair the damage done to its Afro-descendant community. Now let's cross the border into Israel and buckle up, because this is where it gets even more disturbing. Israel markets itself to the world as the only democracy in the Middle East, a homeland for the Jewish people, a nation built on the promise of belonging. But if you are a Black Jew in Israel, that promise has a very different meaning. There are roughly 170,000 Ethiopian Jews living in Israel today, a community known as Beta Israel. Their connection to Judaism stretches back thousands of years. According to their own tradition, they descend from the tribe of Dan, one of the original 12 tribes of Israel. They maintain Jewish practice, ritual, and identity for centuries in isolation in the Ethiopian highlands, long before modern Israel existed. In the 1980s and the 1990s, Israel launched dramatic operations: Operation Moses, Operation Joshua, and Operation Solomon, to airlift Ethiopian Jews out of Ethiopia and Sudan. Thousands were brought to Israel in what was presented to the world as a heroic rescue, a Jewish state bringing its lost people home. But what happened after they arrived tells a very different story. Ethiopian Jews were placed in absorption centers that functioned more like holding facilities. They were subjected to a process of cultural erasure. Their religious practices, which had been maintained for millennia, were deemed insufficient. Ethiopian Jewish religious leaders were told their ordinations were not valid. Community members were required to undergo symbolic conversion rituals, essentially being told that their Judaism was not Jewish enough for Israel. One of the most disturbing scandals in modern Israeli history emerged in 2013 when it was acknowledged that Ethiopian Jewish women had been given long acting birth control injections, in some cases without full informed consent. An Israeli investigative journalist exposed the practice. Health officials had been administering Depo-Provera shots to Ethiopian women at transit camps before they entered the country, and continuing the injections after arrival. The birth rate among Ethiopian Jews in Israel dropped by 50% over a decade. When the story broke, the Israeli Health Ministry issued a directive telling gynecologists to stop prescribing the contraceptive if there was any doubt that the women understood the treatment. Let that sink in. A nation that defines itself by the promise of never again was suppressing the birth rate of its Black Jewish population. It goes beyond reproductive rights. Ethiopian Jews in Israel face systemic discrimination in virtually every measurable category. They are disproportionately poor, they face higher unemployment, and their children are overrepresented in the lowest performing schools and underrepresented in universities. Housing discrimination pushes them into segregated neighborhoods. When Ethiopian and Israeli youth have taken to the streets to protest, which they have multiple times, most notably in 2015 and 2019, they have been met with tear gas, rubber bullets, and mass arrests. Police brutality against Ethiopian Israelis has become a defining issue for the community. Video after video has surfaced of Israeli police beating, arresting, and harassing Ethiopian Jewish citizens. In 2019, the shooting of an unarmed Ethiopian Israeli teenager by an off duty police officer sparked nationwide protests. Thousands of Ethiopian Israelis took to the streets. They blocked highways and they demanded justice. The parallels to Black Lives Matter were impossible to ignore, and they were not lost on Black Americans watching from across the ocean. Then there are the African asylum seekers. Tens of thousands of migrants and refugees, primarily from Eritrea and Sudan, entered Israel through the Sinai Peninsula in the 2000s and early 2010s, fleeing war, dictatorship, and persecution. Israel's response was not compassion. The government built a massive detention facility in the Negev desert. Senior Israeli politicians refer to African asylum seekers as infiltrators and as a cancer. Legislation was passed to detain them indefinitely. Deportation campaigns were launched, pressuring Africans to leave for third countries in Africa with cash payments and threats of imprisonment. The message was unmistakable: Jewish or not, refugee or not. If you were Black in Israel, you were a problem to be managed, not a person to be welcomed. And now, in the middle of this war, Israel is asking the world to support its cause. It is asking for solidarity. It is asking Black Americans, some of whom serve disproportionately in the U.S. military, which is currently fighting alongside Israel, to view this as a fight for democracy and freedom. But democracy for whom? Freedom for whom? If you are connecting these dots, hit that like button right now and drop a comment, because this is the conversation they do not want us having. So here we are, the two nations at the center of the biggest military conflict in a generation, and neither of them can look Black people in the eye with a clean conscience. Iran built a Black population through slavery and then pretended they don't exist. Israel rescued Black Jews from Africa and then treated them as second-class citizens in their own promised land. Iran silences its Afro-Iranian community through neglect and suppression. Israel polices its Ethiopian community through force and systemic exclusion. And both of them, right now today, are asking for your support, your sympathy, your sons and daughters in uniform. This is not about picking a side between Iran and Israel. This is about recognizing that Black people are not a priority for either side. We never have been. We are an afterthought in Iran's domestic policy and a problem to be managed in Israel's social hierarchy. Our history in both nations is one of exploitation, erasure, and control. And yet, Black Americans make up a disproportionate share of the U.S. military that is currently fighting in this conflict. Black tax dollars are funding this war. Black communities will bear the economic consequences of rising oil prices and inflation. And Black voices are being told by both sides to pick a team and cheer. The leaders we study on this channel saw through this decades ago. Malcolm X refused to align with any nation that didn't align with Black liberation. He viewed global conflicts through the lens of what they meant for Black people, not what they meant for empires. He would look at this war and ask one question: what's in it for us? And the answer, as it has been for every war in American history, is nothing. I'm not here to tell you who's right and who's wrong in this war. Smarter people than me are arguing about that, and they can't figure it out either. But I am here to tell you this: before you wave a flag for either side, you deserve to know how that side treats people who look like you. Not what they say in press conferences, not what their diplomats tweet, how they treat Black bodies in their streets, in their hospitals, in their housing, in their courts, and in their history books. And now you know, Iran erased its Black population. Israel marginalized its Black citizens, and both of them are currently engaged in a war that Black American soldiers are fighting and dying in, while Black communities at home receive nothing in return. That's not opinion. That's documented history. That's data. That's the testimony of Afro-Iranians and Ethiopian Israelis who have been saying this for years while the world refused to listen. Now you've heard them. Share this video. Send it to everyone in your group chat. Send it to the person.
All right. All praises to the Most High. So this particular video kind of highlighted a little bit more of the information that wouldn't really be applicable. I think in Iran, definitely he named some of the countries where our people would have come from: Kenya, Tanzania, and some various other places. But the Sudanese, we could certainly have people in Sudan. Did they isolate those people and send them to Iran? Question mark. I really couldn't say with certainty. So, we really couldn't say with no doubt. But what I would say without doubt is if us here, if we, being the children of Israel, were in those countries, we're in Iran, we're in the state of Israel, it wouldn't be for our benefit. And their operation, the same way they're treating these people in that country, they would treat us. They wouldn't say, "Oh, but you all are the children of Israel. You are these people that we should be, dealing rightly with." And so, the treatment would be similar. It's the same treatment that they're giving us here in this country: broken schools, broken systems, the bottom of the barrel. We talked about I believe in the first video, amount of money that goes into these wars. In the second video, Slaki, the amount of money that goes into these wars and whatnot. But yet here we are. I think we over a decade, or almost a decade, and they still haven't fixed the water situation in Flint. They say it costs too much, but yet here we are in another conflict, and it's thought that it's been talked that this could be the beginning of World War III. That's what we've been waiting on, because that last war is going to be what takes us out of here. So if this is it, then all praises to the Most High. We need to be prepared, and we need to keep these commandments that the Most High have given us as we await the return of a Mashiach. So I'm gonna yield there. You got anything on that, Aki?
Khan, I would just add, the video highlighted that a lot of these Afro Persians were in Iran due to slavery. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that, you and I were just speaking about how the book of Esther takes place when many of the Israelites have returned back to the land of Canaan. However, Esther, as well as Mordecai and many other Israelites, remain in Persia for some untold reason. We know that the Israelites were living in different provinces of the Persian Empire. We know all of this from the book of Esther. So, I wouldn't say that initially the Afro-Persians, so-called Afro-Persians that were there from slavery. Now, there was a point where people of color were in rule throughout the known world.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it was in the Iberian Peninsula with Spain and Portugal, you had the Moors that were in control of that peninsula from 700s up until 1492. Likewise, in the so-called Middle East, the people who were once in power were a people of color, not of the sons of Yafet. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the sons of Ham and Shem began infighting, and the sons of Yafet came into the land and pretty much reversed. There was a point where the slaves were coming from the sons of Yafet,
Mm-hmm.
but they reversed that at some point to where it would be Shemites from Tanzania, Kenya, other parts of North Africa or north of Kebulon, even parts of the so-called Middle East. It would have been people of color who would have been being placed in bondage, and our people, namely, because you look at the Arab slave trade, and it was predominantly Israelites that were being taken into that, and we can read about that in prophecy in scripture as well. But I would have liked for them to add that, but that's not knowledge that we're told growing up. So we've got to all continue studying and learning. All praise to the Most High for all that He's done, all that He's doing, and all that He will do. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Indeed. All right. So, in concerns to that last video, I will leave us with this thought from Lamentations, which came from the prophet Yirmiyahu or Jeremiah. This is chapter 4 and verse 17. He says, "As for us, our eyes have yet failed for our vain help, and our watching, we have watched for a nation that could not save us." So whether you're looking at Israel or not Israel, and wanting to think that we should stand with them or we should help them, do the Floyd Mayweather and send not all your resources, but send your resources over to them to help them, to fund them, because you're thinking that these are the people of the Most High. They are not. And this video is evidence that they would treat you the same exact way that they would treat the people that they're over there now, that they're treating them. They would sterilize you and basically humiliate and disenfranchise you with absolutely no problem. Same thing with Iran. Iran is not the savior of so-called black people. Iran is a place with a people that most likely had our people in slavery during the time of the Medo-Persian Empire. So it is thought that these people are the Medes. I cannot deduce that because I haven't researched it, but don't get caught in these ideologies. Your Savior, Israel, is the Most High. Yahweh, Yahuwah, however you choose to say His name, and He has a Redeemer in the form of His Son, Yehoshua, Yahushua, Hamashiach, the Messiah. That's who our help is coming from. That's who our salvation is coming from. So we'll leave off with that. We do this for a very specific reason. Romans chapter 10 and verse 1. Brethren, my heart's desire and prayer to Abba for Israel is that they might be saved. We want to see our people saved. We want to see our people set free. We want to see our people restored to the prominence that the Most High have promised for us. How are we going to do it? First of all, we're going to keep the faith and the belief in Hamashiach, the Messiah, to do that which the Most High have commanded and to save Israel and restore Israel to where we are supposed to be. And also Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. It is so very important to understand that in the conclusion of the whole matter, we are to fear the Most High and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it is all said and done, all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged. Or rather, we have feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the whole duty of man. I am your Akazaki Yahu, joined by my most esteemed Akinanaya, giving all praises, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahweh, Bashem, HaMashiach, Wa Malak, Yahweh Shai, and to the 12 tribes of Israel, who were scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom, Wa Baruchim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait till the day when the Most High brings us back together. We are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant, back in our own land with a heart of flesh and no more a heart of stone, with our enemies, our adversaries, and all those who hate us under our feet. Until that day come, Shalom, family.
Shalom, shalom, Mr. Pekai.
All praises to the Most High. Praise you, Abba Yah, Kwam Yasha'Allah,
Kwam Yashala.
and Barak Hashem, Yahweh.